Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. It has been a hot minute since I uploaded. Before I start, I just want to say thank you for your patience with me if you have stuck around. I'm not even gonna sit here and be like, oh, I've tried, all the rest of it. It's just a lot having a small baby. Joey is now 4.5 months old. He is currently having a nap, so I thought I would finally sit down and try and record this video. It is a video that I know a lot of you have wanted me to do. It is something I've spoken about really openly on Instagram, but I thought I would do a video about our breastfeeding journey. Our breastfeeding journey has been nothing short of turbulent from day one, really. I think turbulent might actually be a little bit of an understatement, in all honesty. I am hoping that I am going to get back into a routine of uploading. You may or may not have seen that we have restarted the podcast. I am starting to be a little bit more active on Instagram. I feel like Joey and I, although we don't have a set routine at the minute, we do kind of have a lot more of a flow. I feel like I know what I'm doing a little bit more now most of the time. And I feel like we're kind of, you know, we found our groove a little bit. So I think hopefully it will be a little bit easier for me to start uploading again without pushing myself too much. So some of you who have been here from the very beginning, whether that be kind of IVF or whether or not that be the beginning of my pregnancy, will know that it was really important to me that I tried to breastfeed. I am very much of the opinion of that you can feed however the hell you want. Like, it is what it is. My personal stance is that I think if you can breastfeed, then try it. Why not? There's obviously an awful lot of proven benefits. It's significantly cheaper. And so to me, I just thought, well, why not? I had put an awful lot of pressure on myself, I think. I really wanted to exclusively breastfeed, and that was something that from day one I was really, really passionate about. I didn't buy a pump, I didn't buy any bottles, I didn't buy anything that would mean that he wasn't feeding from the breast and the breast only, as that was kind of very, very much my plan. When I gave birth, we did the immediate skin to skin, and Joey did latch very, very quickly, and the midwife checked us over and the latch seemed fine. He was feeding fine, but then after that kind of initial latch, he then didn't feed again. So if you watched my birth story, you will know that I was discharged from hospital really quite quickly. I gave birth at 10 to 6 in the morning, and I was home through my front door by about midday, if not a little bit earlier. I can't remember now exactly, but I was out very, very quickly. So other than that first feed at about 6:30 in the morning, he didn't feed again, and I was a little bit taken aback that nobody actually checked that in the hospital. And when we were discharged, all I was told was make sure you feed him when you get home. But then once we got home, we kind of just had immediate issues. Now I know that they cluster feed, and I know that you're also told obviously to make sure that you're feeding them every 2 to 3 hours. Joey just wasn't interested. Like, he would latch and then kind of a couple of minutes later he'd be off again, and then he'd be screaming because he was hungry, and it was almost like it was just constant. Like, it was really, really constant, but he was not latching properly. And then after about 2 o'clock he just didn't latch at all, and he was just not feeding. So we ended up in kind of a panic of he needs to eat something. I sent Marco to the shop to buy one of those kind of ready-made formula bottles. He had maybe a sip of that, like maybe not even that. Like, he was refusing to take it. So it was really it was a really rocky night. The midwife came out the following morning and helped with the latch, which was fine. We got him on and it seemed to be going okay again. But by that night I was extremely sore. I had got cracked nipples. There was a lot that was really, it was really sore, really uncomfortable, and I just knew that something wasn't right, and I wanted to get it looked at really quickly. So on the Thursday, so at this point Joey was 2 days old, we went to a local infant feeding drop-in clinic, and they were lovely. They were absolutely fantastic. They were infant feeding specialists, and they had a look at our latch. They helped me get that latch right. I was a bit cross because the midwife, so we did have a midwife come out that morning as well, so they did send another one out the following day to make sure that you know, the 24 hours had been fine. So we'd had 2 midwives come out. One of the midwives had actually told me that my nipples were possibly too big for his mouth, which was such a bizarre thing to me. I was like, surely that's not actually a thing. And when I was speaking to the infant feeding team on the Thursday, so again when he was 2 days old, they were like, that's ridiculous, like that's really not what is going on here at all. He just needs some help. He was a very, very small baby with a very small mouth. Like, he is such a petite little thing that I don't necessarily think it was easy for him to latch, but it definitely wasn't impossible. Yeah, the long and short of it was that they really helped to get his latch right. They showed me kind of different positions and helped me kind of perfect those positions. It was really beneficial to me, and I think for the rest of that day he did seem to latch okay. It was hard work, but we started using our cushion to kind of prop him up. Like I say, he was very small. Although his weight was quite normal, he was a very petite baby, and so I did find it difficult to kind of feed him and not be slouching or all the rest of it. So that for me was really, really beneficial, and they really helped kind of get that latch sorted. So the next day I was still incredibly sore, and again his latch seemed really shallow. He just wasn't latching on properly. No matter what I did, no matter what position I tried, it was just impossible. And at this point I was really, I mean, I was exhausted. Obviously, you know, I had the 5 days in hospital where I was being monitored constantly, and therefore I barely slept. I'd then given birth. I hadn't slept at all that night. When I was in labour, we've then come home, you don't have any sleep, and I think for 2 days I'd not had any, I'd literally not slept in about a week. And so with everything else that comes with postpartum and the drop of the hormones, I was really, really struggling with the fact that we were finding breastfeeding seemingly impossible. And then that night, so the Friday night, so he was 3 days old, he was absolutely fine, and then the next thing we know, he's throwing up blood. And he isn't just throwing up a little bit of blood, there's a lot of blood. It's bright red, which I've since found out is a better colour for it to be, rather than, you know, if it's dark blood then it seems like it's coming from the stomach or something like that. I can't really remember. But he was vomiting blood, and it was really quite scary. And at first it was just a little bit, and then it was kind of getting more and more. And I had rang 111 because I am a person who, I hate ringing any kind of medical professional. I always feel like I'm wasting their time. I could go in with my head falling off and I would think I was wasting their time. But I didn't really know what else to do. So we rang 111 because he seemed okay in himself. I think, was he not okay in himself, I'd have rang 999. But anyway, we rang 111 and they were like, okay, we'll get a clinician to call you back. The clinician called us back and she was talking us through, and then she said, right, you either need to get him to hospital now, you need to take him to A&E, or we're going to send you an ambulance on blue lights. Like, which one do you want to do? So we were like, no, it's fine, we will drive down there. So we drove to A&E, we gave him our name, we were taken straight through. They were fantastic, they saw him really quick. But when we got in there, we walked in, the nurse was there ready to kind of look him over. He started vomiting blood again, so she took him straight to resus. And that was possibly the scariest thing ever. Like, it is something I would never, ever, ever want to relive. I was absolutely terrified. I was in absolute pieces the whole time. We had a team of doctors and nurses there looking over him, the cannula put in his arm, all the rest of it, all these wires on him. It was horrible, really, really horrible to watch. A consultant then came in and kind of looked him over and said that she thinks it is maternal blood and it is where he has caused so much damage to me, that is effectively what he's bringing up, because if it was anything nasty, she thinks it would be dark blood rather than bright red. And he seemed okay in himself, all his tests were coming back normal, all the rest of it. He was a little bit jaundiced, but not enough for them to be worried about. It was only ever so minor. So yeah, so that's kind of what happened from there. And we were kind of waiting for all his test results to come back, and the consultant in the hospital basically told me not to feed him at the minute, that he was only to have formula, because until they know what it is, they think it could be dangerous me continuing to feed him. So I wasn't breastfeeding. We obviously didn't have any formula on us. That's a lie. I had a bottle of the ready-made stuff in my bag that we had kind of bought as an emergency backup. So I had that in my bag, so I gave him that, but then that's all we had. And We were then transferred over to the paediatrics ward, and I again reiterated to the consultant, so I can't feed him. Like, he's obviously starting to get a little bit stressed because he's hungry. We've given him all the formula that we've got, but can you just clarify right now that I cannot breastfeed him? And she was like, no, you can't breastfeed him, but hopefully he'll be discharged quite quickly and be able to go and get some formula and all the rest of it. And we were like, okay, this is really odd. So we were in the paediatrics ward. Anyway, we ended up being there for nearly 5 hours. It was absolutely ridiculous. Joey was screaming so much because he was hungry. And it was just an absolute nightmare. Marco went to speak to one of the nurses on the paediatric ward and basically say, like, A, have you either got any formula, or B, what do we do? How long are we going to be? And she said, oh, like, no, you can absolutely still breastfeed him. And I was like, but I've just been told not to breastfeed him by the consultant. And they said, oh no, you can. We would advise that you don't, but if he's hungry, then go ahead. Anyway, I was in excruciating pain feeding him. It was horrible. It was really, really awful. But he was refusing to take the breast again. It was all just a pain. He was feeding for kind of a minute at a time and then getting frustrated and all the rest of it. My milk hadn't come in either at this point. And that whole scenario was a bit of a nightmare. Anyway, the doctor came in to discharge us and basically said it's maternal blood, it happens all the time. The nurse panicked because she'd never seen him before, which is why she then took him to resus. All his tests have come back normal and we can go home. So we did. We went home. I continued to try and feed him. It was horrible. It was painful. I really struggled with it. And like I say, he was kind of refusing it. And because he'd had that formula, we decided to continue with it a little bit, just to kind of top him up until I could see somebody else and get some support. So I then went back to the breastfeeding clinic when Joey was a week old. We had like I say, we'd been using the formula, but we'd kind of got to a point where the formula was only being used at night, and the only reason we kind of continued with that was A, because we wanted to know that he was at least getting something. My milk had come in that weekend, so I was fairly confident that he was getting something, even though it was painful for me. So yeah, so he was breastfed with formula overnight so that Marco could help. And then we went to the breastfeeding clinic on the Thursday. So Joey was just over a week old, and they basically just poo-pooed everything that they'd said to us about about me not being able to feed him, etc, etc. Giving him formula top-ups, which was what was advised while we were there. Sorry, I missed that bit. So, but yeah, they'd basically said to us to top him up with formula. They basically said it was all a load of crap. I could have continued to feed him, and that wasn't a problem at all, but his latch again needed readjusting. So once again we went through all of that. We did that. He was checked for tongue tie. He was checked properly. He's been checked for tongue tie 3 times and there was no tongue tie at all. No problem at all. It just kind of continued from there. So then once we'd kind of got his latch better, we went back to just breastfeeding, and it was a case of I breastfed during the day and then I pumped and we gave him breast milk overnight. So he was back to being exclusively breast milk fed. I won't say exclusively breastfed because it wasn't all on the boob, but he was only getting breast milk. The following week I then went back to the clinic because now he wasn't going to the toilet. So we were having plenty of wet nappies, but we weren't having any dirty nappies. We were getting dirty nappies kind of every 5 days. I had spoken to the GP, I'd spoken to numerous people who were all telling me that that was normal. Any IBCLC, so any independent breastfeeding and lactation consultant will tell you that that is not normal, and a breastfed baby should be going once or twice a day. It's very, very rare for them not to. And like I say, Joey was going every 5 days. So we were having a lot of issues with that. I went back, again they assessed his latch. Again it was causing me so much pain and uncomfortable feeling. It wasn't very nice. I wasn't enjoying it because I was in so much pain every single time I was feeding. I was worried about how much he was getting because he wasn't going to the toilet. So to help with the pain and to help with his latch, we opted to use nipple shields. which did absolutely save our journey. I know a lot of people do have issues with nipple shields, but from a personal standpoint, if we had not introduced them at 3 weeks, there is absolutely no way we would have continued breastfeeding, because it was just becoming impossible for me. And like I say, Joey was really struggling with his latch. They seemed to be really beneficial in that the feeds were longer, they seemed to be full feeds. He was then going kind of longer. I don't mean the feeds were longer, sorry. So he was going longer between feeds. He was seemingly able to go, you know, obviously at this stage he was still cluster feeding here and there, but we would be able to go 1.5 hours, 2 hours without a feed, whereas beforehand we were doing no more than half an hour. His latch seemed good, everything seemed fine. We were both really happy, but he still wasn't going to the toilet. So again, everybody I was speaking to kept telling me that this is sometimes normal, and I felt like really banging my head against a wall. I was talking about it on Instagram, and I had breastfeeding consultants messaging me saying this isn't normal, like it absolutely shouldn't be a thing. I then took him to the GP, so we continued the way that we were. We continued with breastfeeding and breastfeeding, and then overnight express breast milk, and everything was going really well except the nappy output. So when he was 6 weeks old, I was sick of being fobbed off. I went to see a pharmacist, and a pharmacist actually said to me, this is really not normal. It was a Friday evening, so she said, you need to ring 111, book an appointment with the out of hours GP and get seen to as soon as possible. So we did. And shock horror, I sat in that GP's office at the hospital for them to tell me that with some babies it is completely normal, and he wasn't constipated, there was nothing wrong with him, it was just his normal, which really wound me up. They gave me some Diarrhelite for him, and I don't really understand why. So that's just kind of like a liquid medicine, which it's basically a laxative. Not Diarrhelite, lactulose is what they gave me. And I was a bit dumbfounded by this, to be honest. I was really baffled, because I knew he wasn't constipated. His stomach wasn't hard. When he was going to the toilet, it was fine. He was fine within himself. He just wasn't going very often. So like I say, I knew he wasn't constipated, but we thought, right, we'll give it a go anyway. And yeah, all it did was give him diarrhea. It didn't solve the problem at all. It wasn't making him go any more often. It was just when we gave it to him, he would then go later that day. Like it wasn't solving the problem, it was just kind of masking it. So that's when I started to get myself really stressed out. I remember we had a Monday and we were just at home, and we were meant to be going out, and it all just went so badly because the feeding was just not right. He was in so much pain. He just was feeding constantly for about 2.5 hours, which I know they do. I know, like I say, they cluster feed. But this just felt like a new level. It was just really stressful. He wasn't happy, and I, as a result, wasn't happy. And I just felt like our entire newborn phase was being completely overshadowed and completely ruined, if you like, by this black cloud that was constantly following me around, and this constant feeling that I was failing him. So at that point I decided that I was going to start pumping more, and I was going to start exclusively pumping, and that's what we did. And one of the reasons I did that was because that night, when I was kind of on the point of really losing it, I was very close to giving up, I posted in, well, 2 of these breastfeeding groups on Facebook. There were 2 that people kept recommending to me. They have breastfeeding professionals as the admins. I had posted in there, explained that we were using shields, etc, explained the issue with his nappies, and people were suggesting that he wasn't getting enough milk from me. The experts assessed his latch, and they were suggesting that because of the nipple shields, there was an issue with the milk transfer. He wasn't getting enough milk, and that was potentially why he was having the issues that he was having. He wouldn't latch without the nipple shields. It was causing so many problems that, again, that is why I then started exclusively pumping, and so I knew exactly how much milk he was getting. And he still wasn't producing any dirty nappies. So I know now, I'm a bit cross now, like it's nobody's fault, like it was obviously something that we needed to explore. The shields, you know, shouldn't really be a long-term solution, but for us I think they could have been. So yeah, so I started exclusively pumping, started feeding him. It didn't change anything, and I just felt at a loose end. I didn't really know what to do. You know, people were suggesting allergies and this, that and the other, but he was fine when he was on formula and wasn't reacting to that. So if it was dairy, then he would have had a reaction there. And I just didn't really know what to do. I was so stuck, but we'd kind of got into a place now where it was just easier. Exclusively pumping was extremely hard, and I did it for as long as I could, and I did it until it was the middle of December, I think. So I did it for about 7 weeks, I think, and it was just hard going because for every feed I had to pump. Being on my own at home all day, it was impossible. Joey was going through a phase where he didn't want to be put down. I didn't have a hands-free pump. I had one of these proper, I don't know how you say it, is it Medela? I had one of their pumps, and then I had an Ardo, I think it's called an Ardo double pump. So it was a big machine because I wasn't just pumping like little bits here and there. Like I needed to pump enough for the feeds, and I was getting quite a lot. I think I was getting about 4.5 ounces with every pump, which is kind of exactly what we needed. That's kind of what he was taking, 4 ounces over a period of about 3 hours, as we were pace feeding. And I think it just, I don't know, it just became really, really hard work. And I think, you know, I was quite happy doing it, but then my cycle came back and my supply completely dropped off, and I just wasn't getting enough. We hadn't built up enough of a stash to kind of get away with a week of not having a very big supply. So I had to give him formula because we completely ran out of milk and I wasn't getting enough. He still wasn't latching kind of without the shields, and it was just kind of one thing after another. We had actually a few weeks before that, so before I stopped exclusively pumping, we had started to see a chiropractor. And the reason I went to see a chiropractor is because so many people had recommended that we went to see a cranial osteopath for Joey, and to see whether or not that had any issues with why he wasn't latching. Our friend is a chiropractor. He is a very, very good chiropractor. He works locally to us in kind of like the next town, and so Marco texted him and kind of said, do you know any cranial osteopaths that work with children, that work with babies? And he kind of said, well, you know, before you go spend all your money doing that, why don't you come and see me and I'll have a look. He's pediatric trained, all the rest of it. So we thought, right, well, we will go speak to him and see what he thinks. And anyway, we went to see him, and he diagnosed Joey with what I want to call a cranial anterior strain, which basically means that when Joey came out, so my delivery, again, if you watch my birth story, you'll know that his kind of entrance into the world wasn't particularly straightforward. He did come out very swollen. He did get a little bit caught. There were no forceps or no instruments involved, but he was very, very swollen when he came out. And he basically diagnosed that during the delivery Joey had twisted, and a little bit like a tea towel, where if you twist the top of it one way, the rest of the body twists the other. So things weren't quite lining up, and you could feel, if you put your finger in Joey's mouth, his suck wasn't very strong. On one side of his mouth, the suck was insanely strong. If you put it on the other side of his mouth, it wasn't at all, and he would try and move your finger over, which explained why he had a favourite side when feeding, why he wasn't latching very well. His stomach was twisted. All of that was kind of all twisted in some capacity, which explained why he wasn't going to the toilet, why he really struggled to burp, and so on and so forth. So we saw our chiropractor for, I can't remember how many sessions we had. I think we had 6 sessions, and the difference it made, I cannot tell you. It was worth every single penny. Within about 2 weeks, we could see that he was burping a lot more often, a lot easier. We weren't there for 45 minutes to an hour every single time trying to get him to burp. He would lay on his back and not be as uncomfortable. He wasn't screaming every time I put him down. He still wasn't latching perfectly, but it was getting better, and more, he was latching every now and again. But we were continuing with the bottle feeding because I had created such an anxiety about him not getting enough, after being told that the milk transfer wasn't right. So this way I knew how much he was getting, which is why I continued with the exclusively pumping. Yeah, so the chiropractor, I think, made a big difference. He started going to the toilet a lot more often. It still wasn't you know, it still wasn't every day, despite the fact that he was having nothing but breast milk, but it had gone from kind of every 5 or 6 days to every 3, which at that point I was quite happy with. And just in general, he just seemed a more settled, more happy baby. So I was really, really happy that we had gone to see Dr. John, and that he was just great. Like, he really was so good with him, and I honestly think it made so much difference. He started sleeping better, like everything was just wonderful. So I really do recommend either going to see a chiropractor or a cranial osteopath if you are having feeding issues. So anyway, going back to when my supply dropped, so it was just before Christmas, and like I say, we ran out of expressed milk, and so I did just start giving him formula and kind of putting him on the breast as and when I could, but he was getting really frustrated, and obviously my supply was lower, and after putting him on formula, he started pooing every day, sometimes twice a day, and it was really annoying, and I was really cross about it, and I was really cross at how happy he seemed on the formula, and so we just kind of went with it from there. He was still having breast milk at night, and I just decided, I kind of got to a point where I was fed up of pumping when my supply kind of increased again. It still hadn't increased enough. Joey was kind of sleeping. He had anyway, before my supply dropped, he had started sleeping longer stretches at night. I didn't want to start getting up at 2 o'clock in the morning just to pump. So I kind of decided to keep him on the formula on the basis that he seemed quite happy on it, and then decided that I didn't want to express anymore because it was just hard work. So I was going to see whether or not he would latch, and if he didn't latch, then that was it. I was calling it a day on our journey, and if he did latch, which I really didn't expect him to, then I'd take it from there. And he would just be formula fed. Anyway, I tried to get him to latch, and what do you know, he latched perfectly first time and has done ever since. I like Marco being able to help me out with the feeds. I like the freedom that I have going out. I like the impact that formula seemed to have on him, and the fact that he seemed like a much happier baby on the formula. He wasn't being as sick, his reflux wasn't as bad, and so it just made sense for us to combi feed from there on in. And so he would be on formula during, well, most of the day, but I would breastfeed first thing in the morning, and I would breastfeed last thing at night, and I would also use it as a soothing mechanism. So if he wasn't settling, he was particularly overtired, or he needed a nap and he wasn't going down, he was upset, whatever, I would use it very much as a soothing mechanism. So we were combi feeding, and have been combi feeding ever since, until the last few days. And I knew it was coming, and I knew that bottle preference would very quickly overtake, and it very much did. And over the last few days, he seems to have been completely refusing the boob. Like, whenever I offer it, he will kind of latch for about 2 seconds and then pull off and just not want it at all, or he just won't latch at all. I have found that really quite hard to deal with. I wanted to get to 6 months, and if I'm really honest, I feel really proud of myself getting to 4.5 months breastfeeding in any capacity, given how difficult our start was. If you followed this, I'm really impressed, because I still struggle to follow it and explain exactly what's happened myself. But I kind of feel like, you know, he made that decision, not me. And that's it now, really. I mean, I still keep offering it and seeing whether he'll take it. And for the last 3 days he hasn't, but then this morning he did. Not for very long, but he did. I imagine because he hasn't over the last few days and I haven't pumped in its place, that my supply is pretty much next to nothing now. I know I can probably still build it back up again, but I don't really know where this leaves us now, to be honest. So I do think our breastfeeding journey is very close to being at the end. As I said, I am extremely proud of the fact that we got to 4.5 months, and I am not going to beat myself up over it. I am not going to feel guilty for the fact that my child is predominantly formula fed, and now pretty much just formula fed. It is what it is, and we tried our absolute hardest, and I can say that with full certainty. I wish it hadn't been as difficult. I do feel like I did everything I could have done. I did contact numerous lactation consultants, but like I say, by this point we, you know, 2 of them One of them couldn't get me in, the other one never got back to me, and the third one did offer to come out and was going to come out and help us, but then we had seen the chiropractor. I was exclusively pumping, and we just thought we just weren't going to spend the money. It is expensive, and unfortunately, if you want proper support, like with many things, you have to go privately. I find it really frustrating that there is a lot of kind of pushing in terms of breast is best, and the NHS really want you to breastfeed, but that support is close to non-existent. The feeding team that we did speak to, those drop-in clinics, I do think were absolutely invaluable. So if you are local and you are kind of struggling with your breastfeeding, I do really recommend going to the drop-in sessions at Karma Baby on a Thursday. But it was just difficult. So I am really proud of us for getting as far as we did. I hope it's not completely over, but I think it is. I really think it is, and I'm trying not to get upset about it. I do feel in some capacity like my body failed me again, and I think after years of infertility, I just wanted to do something myself, and so I did feel really let down by this, but it is what it is. We've done 4.5 months, which I think is an achievement in itself. He's had all the best bits. He's had, in my opinion, you know, a very good start to his life nutritionally. I did everything I could, and I can say that with my head held high. It absolutely hasn't put me off. I think even though we've had such a hard journey, if and when we were to have another baby, I would absolutely try and exclusively breastfeed again. I think I would do things very differently. I know that, you know, most of the time it's not a case of feed and then 2 hours later they want to feed again. I know not to make concrete plans, and I know not to commit to going around people's houses for dinner and things like that, because he may want to feed 15 minutes before we leave, and I may then be sofa bound for 2 hours while he tries and feeds. So, you know, if I had my time again, I would do things a little bit differently, but this is the way it's panned out. It hasn't been the way that I wanted it to be. We haven't necessarily, you know, we may, but at the minute it doesn't look like we're going to make it to the 6 months. It looks like our journey is over, but I gave it all I had, and that's all I can do, really. But I think breastfeeding is definitely the hardest thing, or one of the hardest things I have ever done in my life. I really did not anticipate it being, I knew it would be hard, but I did not anticipate it being as hard as it is. I did not anticipate the way that I felt and how angry it made me feel when it wasn't working, and how I don't even know how to describe it, but how passionate I would feel about making it work and how important it would be to me. I didn't know any of that. And again, I think it's one of those things, I think there's an awful lot with parenthood that actually, until you're in the thick of it and until you know what you're doing, well, I don't think you ever know what you're doing, if I'm honest, and I think anybody who tells you that they do know what they're doing, unless they've got 20 kids, they're a liar. I think, you know, I think you kind of have to live it to understand. And I always found that a really patronising thing when people said that, but I do think there is definitely an element of it that is extremely true. I think until you are in the thick of it, you can't understand how difficult it is because you've not done it. You can kind of empathise with it, and you can, you know, listen and take on board and hear what they're saying, but I think to truly understand it, you've got to live it. And I think that with a lot of things. I think it with infertility, I think it with so many things. But breastfeeding was definitely something that I really didn't anticipate how difficult it would be, and I absolutely take my hat off to these people that continue for years. And I really hope that one day I get the chance to try again, and I get to do it, and I get to exclusively feed the way I want to. And I do find it really, you know, sad that I didn't get to do it to the extent that I wanted to, but we did breastfeed. We breastfed for a long time, really, compared to a lot of journeys. I know a lot of people do give up before the 6-week mark, and I'm really proud of myself. So that, in a nutshell, is our breastfeeding journey, possibly to be continued, but I very much doubt it. So yeah, it's hard work, but my advice would definitely be, if you are struggling with your feeding, that you seek support sooner rather than later. Going to that feeding clinic when Joey was 2 days old was absolutely the best thing I could have done. You can be referred through your health visiting team to the infant feeding team, I believe. But if there are drop-in clinics, I really do recommend it. I am so glad that I went so quickly, because if we'd have left it any longer, there is absolutely no way I'd have made it to 2 weeks, let alone 4.5 months. So, you know, that is my number one piece of advice, I think, to any new parent or any parent, you know, any about to be parent that is considering breastfeeding. Get that support sooner rather than later. I hope this video has been useful. I hope you found it interesting. I am coming back to YouTube. I am going to start back with the daily vlogs. I am really looking forward to coming back. I love making the videos and I hope you enjoy watching them. If there are any specific videos that you would like me to do, please do let me know in the comments. I am up for talking anything baby. I'm up for doing anything IVF related, anything just day-to-day life. Just let me know what it is that you would like to see. You know what I'm like, I don't curate it. I'm not going to sit here and make out that newborn life, or baby life for that matter, he's not a newborn anymore, which breaks my heart. I'm not going to pretend everything's rosy when it's not. So whatever you want to see, let me know. And yeah, thanks for watching. If you haven't already, do make sure that you subscribe to my channel, and I will see you next Sunday for another video.